Okay, hello, John Dove here from Advocacy Club, and we've just had our October session of the debating session at the Advocacy Club. So tonight, our members have been taking part in the special speed mooting style of debating, and I'm just going to share some simple tips in relation to debating. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is structure. So it's very easy to go into a debate and not really have any structure and just sort of go along with an argument, waffle for want of a better term. Having a structure is really important because it allows your argument to flow. It gives a logical methodology to the way in which you're presenting your argument. And if something seems logical, it therefore appears a much more easier argument to follow and therefore can be more convincing. So it doesn't have to be rocket science when it comes to structure. And what I often say, and this is by no means the only way you can structure an argument in terms of a debate, but what I would say is start with a very, very simple introduction. And particularly in a debate like the ones in which you've been involved tonight, where you've only got 5 minutes, you don't want to take up too much of your debate time with an introduction. So keep it simple. Start at the beginning by saying whether you're proposing or opposing the motion. And in very brief terms, set out what point you're going to make. So it might be if you're going to say 3 points, set them out in a very simple sentence. I'm going to argue X, Y, and Z. Then from there, you're going to jump into the main body of your argument and develop your points. So in terms of timing, you might find that your introduction and your conclusion take up about 45 seconds, maybe a minute or so. And therefore, you've got 4 minutes really to develop your main points. So what I would suggest is, given the amount of time you've got, 2, maybe 3 points, just so you can at least give a little bit of time and a little bit of weight to each of the 3 points you're going to make. And then, as I say, come to a conclusion at the end. So effectively wrap up what you've said, a brief reminder, and then a nice concluding line. So, and maybe something along the lines of, for the reasons I've set out, I would invite the House to allow the motion, something simple like that. You then need to think about your delivery. Now, the key thing I find in relation to the delivery is speaking slowly. And I talk about this all the time, and people probably get bored of hearing about this. But I think speaking slowly is one of the best ways, one of the best methods you can put in place really to change your advocacy and change the way that you perform. Because number one, it makes it very easy for people to follow your arguments. It makes it easy for people to hear what you're saying. And number two, when you speak slowly, you appear a lot more composed, you appear a lot more confident, and you appear a lot less flustered than someone who speaks at 5 million miles an hour. So speaking slowly is something really simple that you can do to change your advocacy and make you appear a lot more persuasive. Another simple tip in terms of your delivery is when you are making your strongest point, really emphasize certain words. You can slow down even more on certain words, take a real pause at the end of a significant sentence. And, you can really add some flair, as it were, so you're not sort of monotone all the way throughout. Really punch certain words that you think are important that you need to emphasize. It adds a bit of life to your debate. It makes your audience or your tribunal less likely to switch off and really can add quite an amount of really just make some of your points stronger, if I put it that way. The third tip I'm going to give is think about your opponent's argument. So when you're preparing for the debate, think about your opponent's argument at that point. So what your opponent is likely to argue, and try and deal with those points within your submission. So try and either knock down the points or think about any potential rebuttals and deal with those within your initial submissions. And also, when your opponent is delivering their submissions, listen carefully to what they say, because they might make a point that you've not thought of previously, and it might be quite a significant point that you need to deal with. So really listen to your opponent's argument. Don't just think about what you're doing and, daydreaming or whatever once you've stopped talking. think about what they've said and think about how you can deal with any significant points that your opponent has made, either in your rebuttals or if you're the second person to deliver, maybe try and deal with it in the main body of your argument. Points of information come up, and I see points of information as being very similar to judicial intervention in a courtroom, in a moot, or whatever it might be. So quite often you can think about these in advance. It stems on from the last point that I made, thinking about, you know, the strengths of your opponent's argument, the weaknesses in your argument. So think about these in advance. So you can guess within reasonable parameters what questions or comments may well come by way of points of information. So hopefully you're able to deal with those. And also, if you get a question that is a bit left field, something you're not expecting, something you hadn't prepared for, don't panic. You know, you can pause. You can throw in a bit of a filler phrase just to buy yourself a few seconds. You know, something along the lines of, that is an interesting point that's been raised there. The way I deal with it is as follows, and it gives you some time to think about that. And sometimes it might be that a point has been raised and, you know, it's difficult to deal with. Always think about how you can distinguish it from your argument. So somebody might make a point, see if you can distinguish that argument, that point, from whatever the facts are of the debate, or some way that it can be distinguished that you say it's not really applicable. So or almost like dodging a question, like you see politicians do all the time. And lastly, I think your points need some authority. So when you're making significant points, if you've got a way that you can back that up, so there might be, you know, some sort of study that's out there. There might be some statistical data that can back up what you're saying. There might be case studies. There might be scientific research, whatever it might be. If there's some way that you can have some sort of authority that can back up what you're saying, it makes the points even stronger, and it allows those points to hold even more weight. So they're just some tips that I've got in relation to debating, and I hope you found that helpful.